So the question before us, what happens to wages when firms are larger, matters to income inequality, and a lot of big questions. We'll start from the assumption that we're working with a competitive labor market first. So there's lots of buyers for labor, lots of small-ish firms competing for your labor, and lots of sellers of labor, lots of different people that can offer up that same labor skill. In this market, where no one worker and no one firm has control over wages, we see that wage is going to come to the equilibrium level where supply equals demand. Individual workers could try to get a higher wage, but there's plenty of other workers to be hired at this equilibrium wage, and so they probably are going to be out of luck. Also, firms could try to pay less than this, but there's plenty of jobs available at this wage rate. So wages are going to end up at this equilibrium level. But what happens if a firm is the only hirer of labor? So we'll go to the extreme case of a monopsony. All of the workers are working for this one giant firm. So while the more competitive firm just dealt with whatever happened to be the wage rate and they had no control over it, this firm's going to have some control over it because everybody that's working for them, because essentially everybody that's working in this market is working for them specifically. So they have some price setting power. This is why we see their marginal cost of labor be different than the wage rate. Let's explain that. Let's assume that to hire your first worker would cost you $10. If you wanted to add a second worker, enticing more people to the labor market, you're going to have to probably increase wage rate. Enticing a third worker to the labor market that wasn't willing to work maybe at that earlier wage, going to be $14. So assume an upward sloping supply curve for labor. So ask yourself what the wage cost of one more worker is. So going from 0 to 1, $10. The cost of 2 workers. All right, this is the trick. Think about it. Pause if you want. Did you say that it's $10 plus $12, so $22? Good try, but nope. We treat all wages as equal. So you can't just keep hiring workers at incrementally different wages. Every time there's a hiring decision, we think about wages being more or less equal. So if they want to hire 2 workers, each of those workers is going to be $12. For a total wage cost of $24. Go ahead and practice. What would be the cost of 3 workers? $42. Each of the 3 workers is costing $14. So 14 times 3, $42. So what is the marginal cost of the second worker? Adding the second worker from 1 to 2, you go from a $10 wage bill to a $24 wage bill, so an extra $14. So even though the wage rate for the second and first worker when you're hiring 2 is $12, the additional cost of going from 1 to 2 is $14 because you have to raise the wage not just on the second worker, but on all previously hired workers. So pause this and see if you can figure out what the marginal cost of the third worker is. You go from a wage bill of $24 to $42, extra $18. So when you're a firm that has what we call monopoly power, even though in this case it's a monopsony, you have power, you have mass, you have price setting ability in the market. You face a higher marginal cost of labor. Phew, I'm glad we got that sorted. So what effect does this have on wages? Well, an old adage is that profit-seeking firms will always hire workers until it no longer makes sense. In other words, until it no longer adds to profit. They will add workers until the additional cost of the next worker equals the additional benefit, and not more than that. That's actually a very broad rule in economics. We always do things until the additional benefit just passes the additional cost, and if we keep doing the thing, usually the cost begins to rise or the benefit begins to fall, and there's only one spot where the additional benefit is just exactly equal to additional cost. And this works with firms and workers. So let's say we hire our first worker and he earns us $30 in revenue but costs us $15 in wage. That's going to be $15 of profit he gives us. So he is worth it. He pays his way and then some. So how about a second worker? Should we hire that one? In this case, what do we got? Extra $27 in revenue. Remember, as you hire more workers, they're going to add to your productivity and your output and your revenue, but maybe at a declining rate. There can be, pardon my French, too many cooks in the kitchen. At some point, the productivity is going to decline. You can have 45 cooks in a kitchen. That 45th cook is not going to add nearly as much as the first cook. So we know the pattern is that it's going to start declining over time, and the wage is going to start rising, right? Because this is a monopsony firm and they need to hire more, they need to increase wages, which pushes up marginal cost. So how much extra profit do we get? From this guy alone, $7. Is he worth it? Yes. He earns more for the firm than he costs the firm, adding $7 to their pile of profit. What about this third worker? Does he make the cut? Yeah, he adds $1 of extra profit. He adds more than he costs. So yeah, we're going to hire that guy. I mean, obviously at some point, it's not going to make sense to hire these people anymore. So at that point, we stop hiring. So the correct or profit maximizing level of hiring for this firm is 3 workers. And these 3 workers generate an extra $23 of profit for the firm. So let's apply it. Can you locate the correct quantity of labor, thinking about that rule of hiring additional workers as long as their additional benefit is greater than their additional cost? So where's the additional cost? Everywhere along the marginal cost of labor. What about the additional benefit? The demand for labor is basically the benefit or the revenue that your workers generate. The marginal revenue product or the value of the marginal product of labor, that's the same as this demand for labor. So you're looking for where that demand curve, right, or the benefit of the worker crosses the marginal cost. And boom. Okay, we still have not answered the question, what effect does this have on wages? To answer that question, ask yourself, how much are workers willing to accept? There's actually a curve on here that shows us what workers are willing to accept to work at different quantities of labor. What's the minimum wage they would accept? Your supply of labor curve. So for this quantity of labor, workers are willing to accept as low as this wage. Would they like more? Sure, but they'd be willing to work for this wage or more. This leaves firms with an interesting conundrum. They're willing to pay up to the value that that last worker generated for them, right? The value of the marginal product of their labor or the marginal revenue product of their labor, however you want to put it. But they don't have to because workers are willing to accept a lower wage. So if you're a large, powerful firm, what do you think you're going to do? You're going to pay the higher wage or you're going to pay the lower wage? We'll let Mr. Krabs answer that one. Money, 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 money. So we don't know exactly where the wage is going to be, but we expect that it will be somewhere probably not this high, probably something lower than that. But it depends on the bargaining power of the workers versus the firms. So let's bring back the competitive outcome. Remember that if this were a regular competitive market, the wage would be determined by the intersection of supply and demand, whereas in a monopsony market, the wage is going to be pushed down. We don't know exactly where, but we think it will be pushed down closer to the workers' reservation or minimum wage that they're willing to accept. So the finding will be that wages are likely to fall if a firm gains market power and is less competitive versus workers.